Most people are owned by their emotions. They aren't even aware of it. They think they're making decisions. They think they're being rational, but they're really reacting to the emotional pulse underneath every moment. One insult changes their whole energy. One piece of bad news sends them spiraling. One delay, one moment of stress, and they collapse. Not because they're weak, but because they never trained their response. You have to rewire the way you handle emotion. You don't suppress it, you don't pretend it doesn't exist, but you also don't hand it the keys, you lead it. You feel it, but you don't become it. You observe it, but you don't obey it. That's power. That's what separates those who perform under pressure from those who fall apart. The world doesn't stop throwing punches. The day doesn't pause for your feelings. The schedule doesn't freeze just because you're tired or anxious or overwhelmed. The people who succeed are not unfeeling, they are trained. They have built systems, patterns, habits. They don't wait to feel good to lead. They don't wait to feel calm to execute. They show up anyway because they've taken control. You don't have to be emotionless to be effective. You have to be self-led. Emotion is information, it is feedback, it is part of your intelligence. But if you do not manage it, it will manage you. If you do not understand it, it will confuse you, and if you do not master it, it will own you. This is about power, not just in the world but within yourself, the ability to regulate your state, the ability to hold the line when it's hard, the ability to process emotion without being drowned in it. That's the skill, that's the game, and that's what this seminar is here to build. You will never control your emotions until you stop trying to avoid them. Most people spend their entire lives resisting how they feel. The second tension rises, they run. The second fear shows up, they numb it. The second anger spikes, they unleash it or suppress it, but they never lead it. And if you cannot lead your emotion, it will lead you. It will drive your behavior, your patterns, your relationships, your habits, not because it has to, but because you never trained another response. The first step in learning to control your emotions is learning to feel them without obeying them. That requires presence, awareness, breath. You have to learn how to stay in your body when the old you wants to exit. You have to slow the system down when your nervous system starts racing. And that starts with a single pause, one breath, one space between trigger and reaction. Most people never access that space. They live in reaction. They say, that's just how I am. No, that's just how you've practiced being. You've practiced overreacting. You've practiced snapping back. You've practiced shutting down. You've rehearsed those responses so many times they've become your default. And if you want something different, you have to rewire the loop. You start by feeling the physical signal. Every emotion begins in the body. The breath tightens, the jaw clenches, the stomach twists, the pulse rises. If you're not aware of those signals, you're already behind, because the emotion is in motion before you even name it. So the training begins with presence. You learn to spot the shift, you learn to catch the spike, you say, there it is, and not with panic but with precision. And once you've caught it, you don't judge it, you observe it. I'm feeling anger right now. I'm noticing fear. You name it not to identify with it, but to create space. Language gives you leverage, naming gives you distance, and in that distance, you get to choose how to lead, not react. You build a pattern of pause, a rhythm of breathing, a habit of internal grounding that doesn't require perfect circumstances to activate. You learn to regulate in real time. You learn to feel intensity and not be consumed by it. And the more you do this, the more your system starts to trust you. The more your nervous system starts to realize we're okay here, we don't need to run. This is not about suppression. Suppression is avoidance wearing a discipline mask. Suppression is silence that builds into explosions. Control is not silence, it's choice. Control is feeling the wave and staying on your feet. Control is holding tension in the body and breathing anyway, speaking anyway, moving anyway. The second you stop resisting the emotion, you begin to reclaim authority over it. The second you stop being afraid of the feeling starts to lose its grip. This is how you build power. Not by ignoring your internal state, but by becoming the person who doesn't flinch when it moves. You make this a daily practice. You start in small moments, a frustrating conversation, a moment of overwhelm, a wave of hesitation. Instead of reacting, you pause. Instead of venting, you breathe. Instead of spiraling, you scan. What am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? What story is this emotion trying to sell me? Because every emotion comes with a story. Anger says they're wrong. Fear says you're not enough. Guilt says you failed. If you don't question the story, you'll act like it's true. And then your actions start reinforcing a narrative that was never yours to begin with. So you interrupt the loop, you get honest, this is what I feel, this is what the old me would do, but that's not who I am now. You don't need to fix the feeling, you just need to refuse to be run by it. And the more you do that, the more stable you become, the more emotionally consistent you become. Most people are emotionally fragile. Any spike in stress and they spiral. Any challenge to their ego and they collapse. Any resistance and they revert to old patterns, but you're not most people. You're building something different. You're building the kind of presence that doesn't shake under pressure. That presence comes from pattern recognition. It comes from training your nervous system to stay open when everything in you wants to close. It comes from the quiet decision, I feel this, but I choose how I respond. Not once, repeatedly, until that decision becomes a reflex, until leadership becomes your default. You will still feel the emotion. That doesn't make you weak, that makes you human, but what makes you powerful is what you do with it. You lead it, you guide it, you move through it without losing yourself inside it. That's how emotional control is built. There is no emotional control without emotional responsibility. You cannot lead a state you still blame on someone else. The second you say, he made me feel this, or she ruined my peace, you've given your power away. You've put your emotional thermostat in someone else's hands and said, control my temperature. That's not power, that's dependence. That's emotional slavery. Winners don't do that. They don't hand their state over to circumstance. They don't outsource their inner world. They own it. Even when it's hard, even when it feels unfair, even when every part of their mind wants to blame, because they know that control is born from responsibility, and responsibility is a decision. You start by taking inventory. You begin to watch how often your language gives your power away. They stressed me out. That made me angry. I can't help it. This always ruins my day. Catch that, interrupt that, ask yourself, did it really make me feel that, or did I respond with a pattern I haven't outgrown yet? You start separating the event from the emotion. You start seeing that what happened is not the same as how you interpreted it. What they said is not the same as what you decided it meant. You draw that line, you create space. That space is where you step into leadership. You start tracking your emotional triggers not to judge them, but to understand them. Because the more you understand your patterns, the less you're surprised by them. You start seeing that certain tones, phrases, looks, environments activate something old. They activate a memory, a wound, a story. And instead of reacting, you pause, you name it, you take the wheel. When you feel disrespected, you don't explode. You question the story. Was that really disrespect, or is my ego reacting? When you feel abandoned, you don't panic. You ask, is this real or a replay of an old loop? You stop letting past programming run your present behavior. You stop needing everyone to understand you in order to stay stable. That's a hard one. Most people crave validation so deeply they lose themselves trying to keep the peace. But emotional mastery doesn't need permission. You don't need them to agree with you. You don't need them to fix it. You lead your internal state whether they come with you or not. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you strong. You stop waiting for the world to be safe before you're calm. You stop waiting for everything to feel good before you're grounded. You start creating safety from within. You become the source, and that means you're unshakable, not because you're numb, but because you've built structure. Leadership is not emotional suppression, it's not avoidance, it's not forcing yourself to be positive when things are breaking. It's telling yourself the truth but not letting the truth become a weapon against yourself. Yes, I'm tired, but I can still move. Yes, I'm upset, but I don't lose the mission. Yes, this hurts, but I'm still the one in charge. You build that voice, the inner voice that doesn't yell but holds the line. The voice that doesn't panic but redirects, you build it by using it. You train it in the small moments before the big ones arrive. When tension hits, that voice is ready. Breathe, ground, stay sharp, lead here. And the more you use it, the stronger it gets. It becomes your compass. While others are being dragged by their impulses, you are standing on your standard. While others are defending their reactions, you're leading your decisions. While others are trying to escape discomfort, you're transforming inside it. That transformation doesn't happen all at once, it's layered. You will still feel things, you will still get triggered, but you'll recover faster, you'll stabilize quicker, you'll speak with more precision, you'll move with more clarity. Because now your emotions are not in charge, you are. This is not about becoming cold, it's about becoming clear. The goal is not to avoid emotion, it's to channel it, to use it, to shape it. Anger becomes fuel, sadness becomes reflection. Fear becomes focus. That's mastery, that's the rewired mind, and when you live from that place, you don't lose time to emotional spirals. You don't delay your progress because you got stuck in a mood. You don't talk yourself out of greatness because you felt misunderstood. You keep moving. You keep leading, you keep winning because your emotions follow your direction, not the other way around. You cannot master your emotions if you keep avoiding discomfort. You can't rewire your emotional response if you only show up when it's easy. Control is not built during calm, it's built during chaos. You don't learn to lead emotion by reading about it, you learn by stepping into the tension and holding your ground. Discomfort is the training ground. It's the lab where all emotional patterns are exposed. That's where the real work lives. In the moment you want to shut down, in the moment your stomach knots, in the moment your old self would have lashed out, disappeared, or numbed out. That's the moment that rewires everything if you stay in it. Most people exit too soon. They feel the wave come and they look for a way out. Food, television, blame, escape, anything to change the state. But that exit becomes a habit, and that habit becomes identity. I can't handle pressure. I'm just sensitive. I always panic. None of those are facts, they're repetitions. If you want to control your emotions, you have to teach your nervous system that discomfort is safe. That activation doesn't mean collapse. That stress doesn't mean shut down. You have to stretch your window. Expand your capacity, and that only happens when you stay, not forever, just long enough to prove something new. You stay and breathe. You stay and speak with precision. You stay and hold your body in alignment when every muscle wants to cave. You don't perform, you don't pretend, you just stay. You tell your system, I can feel this and not fall apart. That becomes your new proof, your new reference point. And over time, your body starts to believe you. The wave still comes, but it doesn't control you. The voice of panic still whispers, but it doesn't direct you. You've trained a new response. This is where strength is built. In the micro moments, in the pause before the reaction, in the exhale that interrupts the spiral, in the restraint that rewrites the loop. This isn't about looking calm. It's about being calm, or even better, being grounded while being activated. You don't need to eliminate discomfort, you just need to stay conscious inside it, stay aware, stay clear. The discomfort is the opportunity, it's the representative, it's the stimulus, and the more reps you take, the more fluent you become. You speak the language of your own nervous system. You interpret what used to scare you, now you're dangerous. Because the world doesn't make you flinch, people don't make you fold, pressure doesn't make you disappear. You've trained for this, you've rehearsed this, you've done the work when it didn't look pretty, and now you hold ground that others abandon. That doesn't mean you never get triggered. It means you don't hand over the wheel, you don't spiral into reaction. You don't build a story around the spike, you say, here it is, and I'm staying over and over. That's the rewiring. That's the shift. And as you do this, you start moving through life with more command, not because you know everything. The crucible of connection. Where true emotional control is forged, emotional control isn't developed in isolation, it's tested in relationship. It's easy to remain calm when you're alone, to feel centered in silence, but the real rewiring, the true growth, happens when others enter the picture. It's when opinions clash, when tones shift, when someone questions your intentions, that's when the real work begins. That's when your emotional patterns are fully exposed. You might think you've grown, only to find someone pressing the exact button you thought you'd uninstalled. Someone might mirror a version of you that you've been desperately trying to shed, or walk in with the same energy that used to destabilize you. This is the ultimate test, and how you handle it isn't about them, it's about you. You simply cannot blame others for your emotional chaos. You don't get to say, they made me snap, or they got under my skin, or they triggered me. These might be factual observations, but they are not justifications. When you allow someone else to dictate your emotional state, you're giving away your power, you're handing them the controls. And if they can access your emotional buttons, they can easily manipulate your behavior. Setting your boundaries, protecting your inner sanctuary. This is precisely why emotional control must include boundary work. And I'm not just talking about external boundaries, but internal ones. These are boundaries on how much space you give to someone's tone, how much authority you grant to someone's opinion, and how quickly you react when you feel disrespected, dismissed, or misunderstood. Boundaries aren't about cutting people off, they're about holding your center. They're about consciously deciding what enters your energy and what doesn't. They're about slowing the gap between a stimulus and your response. So instead of flinching, you breathe. Instead of attacking, you pause. Instead of collapsing, you stabilize. You become a container for your own emotions, not by bottling them up, but by becoming big enough to hold them, strong enough to carry them, and aware enough to lead them. You stop being thrown around by the energy in the room. Instead, you become the one who studies it, not with volume, but with a grounded presence. You learn to listen while still regulating your own state. You learn to speak with precision even when you feel heat rising in your chest. You learn to stay respectful even when you feel provoked. This is because your values don't collapse when your emotions rise. You hold the line. You stay in integrity, not for the other person, but for your own standard. This isn't about being passive, it's about being principled. It's not about silencing your feelings. It's about expressing them from a place of alignment instead of pure reaction. You say what needs to be said, but you say it from clarity, not from a wound, not from an emotional spike, and not from a place that will leave you cleaning up a mess later. Emotional control, a skill, not a gift. You train this like any other skill. You notice the emotional buildup, you observe how your body reacts, and you practice pausing without shutting down. You stretch the window between activation and decision, building space, and in that space you insert leadership. Emotional control isn't a gift or an inherent trait. It's a habit. It's a practiced, rehearsed, and embodied habit that shows up strongest in the very places where you used to fall apart. In the exact kinds of conversations where you used to raise your voice, close your heart, defend yourself, lash out, or retreat, but now you lead. You don't wait for the other person to calm down, you hold your center regardless. You don't match their energy, you anchor your own. You don't get sucked into their pattern, you set the tone with yours. This isn't about being perfect, it's about being practiced. It's about catching yourself in the moment and choosing not to repeat the old story. Even if the feeling is familiar, your response is different because now you know the cost. Now you know what it takes to lead yourself through the storm. You stop needing closure, stop needing to be understood, and stop needing everyone to match your level. Why? Because the win isn't in the conversation itself, it's in how you carry yourself through it. It's in the emotional standard you refuse to lower. It's in the way you speak, move, and breathe, like someone who has already done the work. Rewiring your default. From reaction to intentional action, controlling your emotions isn't about changing what you feel. It's about changing what you do when you feel it. The old programming says you feel it, you act on it, anger rises, you snap, anxiety spikes, you hide. Doubt appears, you shut down. That's not emotion, that's conditioning. That's muscle memory built from repetition. You've run the same pattern so many times that it feels automatic. But automatic doesn't mean permanent. You can train a new default. You start by shifting your relationship with emotional discomfort. You stop treating it like a problem and start treating it like a prompt. You feel fear. That's not a stop sign, that's your cue to lead. You feel tension. That's not a trigger to escape, that's an invitation to breathe deeper. You feel doubt. That's not a green light to hesitate, that's your reminder to recommit. Most people think emotion is the enemy of discipline. It's not, untrained emotion is. But if you can feel and still move, still speak, still follow through, then emotion becomes feedback. It becomes energy. It becomes a part of your leadership because you're no longer reacting, you're choosing. That level of control is built in repetitions. In small daily moments where you do what you said you'd do, even when your mood doesn't match it. You said you'd wake up early, but you feel drained, you get up anyway. You said you'd speak calmly, but you feel heat rising. You regulate and speak anyway. You said you'd finish the task, but you feel distracted, you finish anyway. This is how you teach your nervous system, I feel, but I move anyway. You build a system that holds when the emotion wants to fold. Building your emotional structure. Anchors in the storm, you need to be trained so when emotion spikes, you don't freeze. You follow the structure, and that structure becomes a lifeline. You create anchors, routines, rituals, and habits that you obey regardless of how you feel. They don't depend on motivation, they don't depend on emotion, they are tied to your identity. Every time you show up in them, you reinforce that identity. You are someone who doesn't quit when it gets heavy. You are someone who doesn't get pulled out of alignment when pressure shows up. Because now your emotion isn't in charge, your principle is, your breath is, your discipline is, and when that becomes your rhythm, everything shifts. You start to trust yourself not because the feelings disappeared, but because they no longer direct your behavior. You still get tired, but you lead. You still feel overwhelmed, but you move. You still feel anxious, but you speak. Because the goal isn't to avoid emotions. It's to learn how to move while carrying them quietly, powerfully. That movement becomes your proof. That's what changes your self-image, not affirmations, not hope, but the quiet, repeated experience of showing up with your emotion and still doing what needed to be done again and again until that identity is undeniable, until you can confidently say, I trust myself because I've watched myself move under pressure. This is the edge. This is what separates those who rise from those who repeat. You're not trying to become someone who never feels, you're becoming someone who feels and still holds the standard, still leads, still executes. The unyielding foundation, why emotional control is non-negotiable. The world will still test you. People will still challenge you. Pressure will still hit. But when you're trained, it doesn't break you, it reveals you. And that version of you. The one who stays grounded, the one who doesn't flinch, the one who leads their emotion instead of being led by it, that version wins. Emotional control isn't a bonus skill, it's the foundation. Without it, talent burns out, discipline breaks down, focus shatters, and leadership collapses. You can have the best plan in the world. But if you can't hold your ground when emotions rise, the plan doesn't matter. It gets rewritten by fear, delayed by doubt, and dismantled by pressure. This is the line most people never cross. They build habits but not stability. They build goals but not grounding. They chase success but never train for storms. So, when the storm hits, they crumble not because they're weak, but because they were never trained to hold the weight of their own emotions. But you're not most people. You've done the work, you've trained the pause, you've strengthened the response. You've rebuilt the system. Now you don't just act differently, you feel differently. You don't need calm circumstances to stay steady. You don't need everything to go right to keep moving. You've installed a different default. You feel pressure and you breathe. You feel doubt and you execute. You feel triggered and you hold your frame. You feel hesitation and you lead anyway. That's the difference. That's the shift. That's the victory. Your new reality, leading with intention. You're no longer run by emotion. You're run by decision. You're no longer waiting to feel okay before taking action. You're taking action because that's who you are now. That's who you built. That's who you chose over and over until it became instinct, and now that version of you, that version is trustworthy. That version doesn't need hype, doesn't need validation, doesn't need the perfect mood to hold the standard. That version leads under pressure, speaks with clarity, moves with purpose, and wins with repetition. This is the person you train to be, not once but daily, because emotions don't stop showing up. You just stop being ruled by them. You lead them, you move through them, you command the energy they carry and turn it into something productive, something powerful. That's what this game is about, not emotionless, not robotic, not numb, but grounded, aligned, built. You're no longer just aware of your emotional patterns, you are in charge of them. You no longer collapse when the heat rises, you sharpen. You no longer default to reaction, you choose your response.